Despite all his rage, he's still just Nicolas Cage. Despite all his rage, he's still just Nicolas Cage. And someone will say his career can never be saved. Despite all his rage, he's still just Nicolas Cage. Hey guys, welcome to another installment of Just Nicolas Cage, where I very slowly work my way through Nicolas Cage's filmography. If you've been following along, you'd know that at this point in Nicolas Cage's career, he's been on one hell of a streak. He went from a movie about chemical weapons in Alcatraz to a movie about convicts on a plane, and followed that with a movie about face-swapping technology. So I can't wait to find out what today's movie, City of Angels, is about. City of Angels is a romance film co-starring Meg Ryan. So City of Angels is a romance film co-starring Meg Ryan in which Nicolas Cage plays an angel called Seth, who roams around Los Angeles invisibly while overseeing human life, and he guides dying people into the afterlife. He falls in love with a human heart surgeon played by Meg Ryan, and he decides that he doesn't want to be an angel anymore so he can pursue a relationship with her. So City of Angels is a remake of a 1987 German film called Wings of Desire, which I watched recently for the first time. It's directed by Wim Wenders, who directed Paris, Texas, which is a fantastic film. Wings of Desire is a black and white art house existential film, and honestly I found it a little challenging to watch. You have these long metaphorical poetic speeches that can get a little bit tiresome, and the film isn't very plot driven. There is a narrative, but it often takes a back seat to sequences of people just walking around. And a large portion of this movie is just shots of random people with like dubbed over voiceover audio, where the audience gets to hear these like inner thoughts and streams of consciousnesses of these random characters.
Deine Frau hat dich verraten. Dein Freund ist in einer anderen Stadt. Deine Kinder erinnern sich nur noch an deinen Sprachfehler.
And this took me a little while to get used to. At first it just feels like a bunch of random dialogue being thrown at you, and it's pretty overwhelming. Although that is probably the feeling you would get if you could read people's minds. And eventually I did get used to this gimmick, and it made for some really interesting scenes. We get a brief insight into a high school girl prostitute. We hear the thoughts of a dying man that was in a motorcycle accident. There's a really devastating part where we see the final thoughts of a guy who kills himself. It's a structure that I really haven't seen in a movie before, and I thought it was utilized really well. And once I began to understand those parts, I began to appreciate the beauty of the film as a whole. And it really is beautiful. It's shot beautifully, and the camera work is incredible at times. And the black and white is used in a really clever way too. It's mostly black and white, but then you have these snippets of color, which I didn't really understand at first, but then I realized that the color parts are from the point of view of a human character, and all the other parts are in black and white because in this universe, angels can't see color. And that leads to this beautiful transition at the end when Bruno Ganz does become human. Bruno Ganz plays the lead angel. You might recognize him from Downfall, or all the parodies of Downfall.
Das war ein Befehl! Der Angriff Steiners war ein Befehl!
And he's really, really good, especially at the end. The great musician Nick Cave is also an important part of this film. Firstly, his song The Carney is put to great use. It's a sad song about a missing circus performer, and in the movie the song is listened to by a circus trapeze artist who's sad that her circus is closing down. But in addition to his song being in the movie, Nick Cave makes an actual appearance in the film at the end. He even gets a very funny gag with his inner thoughts.
One more song and it's over. But I'm not gonna tell you about a girl. I'm not gonna tell you about a girl.
I want to tell you about a girl.
And that's about it for Wings of Desire. Wait, just one more thing. Peter Falk is in this movie, and he's playing himself, and he's great.
Columbo had no hat. That was a hell of a costume. Well, it was your own coat. Hey, Peter, where's your raincoat? Being cleaned and burned.
He's really likable, and he has some of my favorite streams of consciousnesses in the film. And then at the end, it's revealed that he used to be an angel himself, which I thought was a great little twist. I do kind of wonder if anybody in this universe has ever wondered why there's no photos of Peter Falk when he was young, or no information about his childhood or something like that, because in this universe he appeared on Earth as a middle-aged man. But never mind that, Peter Falk crushes the part and he's an excellent addition to the film. I think a big reason as to why this film is considered a classic is because it touches on so much. It has such like a scattershot approach where it covers a wide gamut of facets of human life. So I think different people can latch on and connect to different elements about the film. And it really does have so many standout memorable parts. I complained about it being a little bit inaccessible, and I do think it is. But once I dug into it, I really did enjoy it. So the question is now, how do you adapt a German existentialist art house film for Hollywood? And to be fair, City of Angels does retain some key things from the original. They're both stories about an angel who observes humanity with his fellow angel named Cassiel, and the lead angel yearns to experience human life after falling in love with a woman, and he gets advice from a former angel. You have some very similar shots. They even do the inner monologue thing a couple of times.
He's never gonna leave her.
20 minutes, 20 minutes. Everything in this damn city is 20 minutes.
But the movie really doesn't take advantage of that concept in the way that Wings of Desire does. It feels a little bit like they went, the German movie did the voiceover thing, let's just do it to say we did it, take it off and move on. I think the ways in which the lead angelic character is depicted to fall from, angelic status into humanity highlights how different the two films are. In Wings of Desire, Bruno Ganz simply makes the inner decision to become a human, and the audience is told as such from the powerful use of color. Nicolas Cage's fall from heaven is depicted as a literal fall. It's very heavy-handed, and I think that applies to a lot of the film. Like I said, Wings of Desire covers a wide array of themes and subjects. It's about the minutiae of human life. It's about history and memory and mortality and morality. But I think City of Angels is primarily just a narrative-driven love story. And romance is certainly a part of Wings of Desire. There's a whole storyline about Bruno Ganz falling in love with a trapeze artist. But in City of Angels, that whole love story takes up what feels like 75% of the film. Another major change is that Nicolas Cage and Meg Ryan in this movie interact with each other a lot before he becomes a human, which kind of completely goes against the rules of the original film. In Wings of Desire, she can only kind of feel his presence. Maybe they do interact a little bit in a dream or something, but they certainly don't talk to each other until he becomes human. But in City of Angels, they're full on interacting with each other early on. I guess in City of Angels, the angels can make their form seen by certain people if they want. But it just feels like an excuse for Nicolas Cage and Meg Ryan to interact with each other as much as possible. It also does make the angels' decision to become human feel a little bit more superficial. Because they probably could have an okay relationship if he wasn't in human form. It seems like the only drawback is that he can't feel a human touch. Like they kiss and he feels nothing. So while Bruno Ganz was motivated to become human to feel the minutiae and intricacies of human life, it seems like Nicolas Cage mainly wants to become a human so he can have sex. So let's get on to the performances. Nicolas Cage gives quite an understated performance.
Are you God?
No.
I think there's a certain subreddit that would beg to differ. Like with Bruno Ganz in the original, a lot of his performance does just entail him standing around looking sad. But while Bruno Ganz's presence does mainly come off as warm and comforting, which is kind of funny considering he's most famous for playing Hitler, Nicolas Cage does come off as a little bit creepy. There is something a little bit sinister about his early scenes. It almost reminds me of something out of It Follows. And I don't think I like the idea of invisible angels always watching me. It's kind of disturbing. I mean, this was a problem I had with the original a little bit too. I don't think I want an invisible guy right over my shoulder. But yeah, Nicolas Cage is a little miscast here. When I think Nicolas Cage, I don't immediately think quiet, calm, comforting presence. But once his character becomes human, Nicolas Cage does have some fun moments.
Down and down and down I go. Round and round and round I go. Round and spin. Love in the spin I'm in. Love in that old black magic called love.
Meg Ryan plays the love interest heart surgeon. She has a casual boyfriend who isn't quite right for her, which is something never done before in a Meg Ryan movie. Some of her characterization confused me a little bit. Like, she first meets Nicolas Cage in the hospital and he's just standing around, and then he says that he's in the hospital to visit her even though they've never met before. And she doesn't respond by calling security on him. And later when he tells her that he can't feel anything, she responds by slapping the hell out of him and calling him a freak. You're the craziest person in a scene involving the angelic Nicolas Cage. That's a hell of an accomplishment. I didn't love her performance, but she does have some moments of solid acting. Dennis Franz plays the counterpart to Peter Falk from the original. He's a former angel who's now happier as a human. No offense to Franz, but he's a little bit of a downgrade from Columbo on the coolness factor. But I actually liked him a lot in this. He's genuinely, funny and likable.
Nathaniel Messenger. Glutton, hedonist, former celestial body, recent addition to the human race.
And I completely buy him as a guy who's fully embraced the fun part of human life. But you also see his naked ass at one point, which I could have done without. Andre Braugher, Captain Holt from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, plays the character Cassiel, who was also in the original. But here he barely has anything to do, which is really disappointing because in the original he has this sad storyline where he fails to save a suicidal man, and then he falls into a depression. It was the perfect juxtaposition to Bruno Ganz's character's arc. But here the character's just there. He interacts with Nicolas Cage a few times, and Andre Braugher is good here. But without giving him a storyline, it's what was even the point of him being here? And speaking of actors famous for playing sitcom characters, Nick Offerman makes a cameo.
Ron, your mustache fell off.
Leslie, you goofball.
I was kind of disappointed that Nick Cave didn't pop up again in the remake, partly because the set piece of his concert was such a cool part of Wings of Desire, but also partly the novelty of being able to say that Nick Cage was in a scene with Nick Cave. But instead of Nick Cave in the soundtrack, you have Alanis Morissette and the Goo Goo Dolls, which is another downgrade if you ask me. The Goo Goo Dolls song is that song Iris. You probably know that song even if you don't know the title. You know that song and it goes like, and I don't know the world that can see me, and I don't know that they'd understand. You know that song. I actually found this whole thing from the lead Goo Goo Doll himself. I don't know how to pronounce his surname, so let's call him Jonathan Goo Goo. So anyway, Johnny Goo Goo was talking about his thought process behind the song and said, I was thinking about the situation with Nicolas Cage in the movie. This guy is completely willing to give up his own mortality just to be able to feel something very human. And I think, wow, what an amazing thing it must be like to love someone so much that you give up everything just to be with them. And I will say, I always thought that that song was like generic white guy, easy listening fluff. But when you look at the lyrics, almost every line does kind of correlate to the central themes of the movie. And I'd give up forever to touch you. That's what the movie is about. And reading that thing, it did kind of make me like that song a little bit more. And now I wish every song was written from the point of view of a Nicolas Cage character. So I don't usually do this, but we need to talk about the ending. So spoiler alert for the ending of the movie from 1998. Okay, 3, 2, 1. So Nicolas Cage revokes his status as an angel to become a human to be with Meg Ryan. They have sex, and then literally the next morning, Meg Ryan is riding her bike with no handlebars, and plows right into a truck and dies. And this pissed me off. Not only does it make Meg Ryan's character just feel like a generic woman plot device sacrificed for the whims of the screenwriter, it just reeks of contrived, forced tearjerker bullshit. Wings of Desire has a nice, uplifting ending where the couple get together at the end. It's a little simple, yeah, but the movie earned it. But with the ending of City of Angels, you just feel a writer on his laptop going, ooh, I know how to make people sad. And if that's not enough, they cut to a Peter Gabriel song called I Grieve to really hammer things home. The movie does try to spin this into an uplifting ending, because now Nicolas Cage is living a good life as a human, even though he stopped being an immortal, angelic being just for one night of sex, which I guess some people would say is worth it. But what about poor Meg Ryan in all this? Admittedly, she probably shouldn't have been cycling down the road with her eyes closed like a psychopath, but it just feels like such an unnecessarily cruel ending. So overall, I did not particularly care for this movie. I mean, I can't call it terrible. The performances are mostly pretty good, and on a production level, it's quite competently made. There's some nice shots. But watching Wings of Desire and then City of Angels, it just left me angry with a bad taste in my mouth. I mean, Wings of Desire isn't one of my favorite films by any means, but it's just the principle of somebody essentially taking a piece of art and then removing all the beauty and stripping it down to the most commercial and marketable package that they could sell. The movie does almost feel like a parody of how Hollywood would Americanize a German art film. I guess if I hadn't seen Wings of Desire, I wouldn't come down so harshly. I'd probably say it's a passable but kind of cheesy and contrived tearjerker. Although even then the ending still would have pissed me off. If you're a sucker for Meg Ryan movies that are engineered to make you weep at the end, and there is an audience for that of course, then sure, check it out I guess. But otherwise no, I do not recommend this movie. And if you're into art house films and you don't mind a slower pace, I definitely recommend Wings of Desire. It's worth a watch. So the next movie Nicolas Cage did was Snake Eyes. So until then guys, thanks for watching.